This is an interesting concept you brought up, though, that boomers still treat millennials like they're 18.
Yes.
And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
obviously not every single boomer, but many of them. And there was a meme for a while where millennials were like, boomers, we're 40. We're 40 years old. But for some reason, the narrative coming out of a lot of these old school like media people who still have control of the reins while they do, was that like, why are millennials like this or like that? And the response from millennials were like, I'm 38 years old. I don't know why you're talking to me like this. Mm-hmm. You know?
Well, and if they are like this or that, I'm largely thinking it's because we have a boomer class that said you're all children, and so we expect you to act that way. So they rose to the occasion and acted like children and didn't take on responsibilities and don't want to have families and want to be in sort of perpetual young adulthood, adolescence for a long time. I mean, maybe boomers should take some responsibility for some of our cultural woes here.
It's pretty wild. You know, for the longest time, millennials were, I just generally the concept that the boomers, for whatever reason, view themselves as adults. And one of the things that's really fascinating to me is whenever I find myself in a situation with someone who's older, they say, you're very young. And I'm like, I am 38. Like, I am, like, quite literally life expectancy in this country is 73 for males. So, you know, when I jokingly say I'm halfway there, it's like only a half joke. And then I have older people, boomers, say, oh, get out of here. You're a young man and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm 38, dude. I'm not young.
Yeah,
They're
but
saying
if
that to
you're-
convince themselves otherwise.
Right, I was going to say, if you're not young, then they are very, very
self-justifying
old.
for their power.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're going to run a gerontocratic society, you have to have this idea like, well, they'll get their turn. But
So what do you call it? Geriocratic?
Gerontocratic.
Gerontocracy.
Gerontocracy. Rule by the old. So the conjugation would be gerontocratic.
This is what we currently have going on. It's become a joke where there's a meme where it's an old lady and she says something like, when I was your age, we used to listen to 8-track. And then the young woman goes, that's nice, Grandma. Let me get you to the Senate. Like, it is, yeah, like, you know, we got put in the wheelchair. Okay. There was one joke where it's like, I can't remember which comedian did this, but he was like, you know, my grandfather is getting on in his life and his memory's not so good. We find him struggling to walk and he's not using a wheelchair. So we think it's time to put him in Congress. And so, but for real, like why is this happening? That in the United States, we have this stunted generational world. Look, we talk about how I've jokingly said that time stopped in the 90s or the 90s were the last decade. After the 90s, everything started to bleed into one and boomers have maintained, and I'm not ragging on the entirety of the boomer generation, but many baby boomers in positions of power maintained that they are adults and millennials are children. And now we are quite literally experiencing, very much so, many millennials who act like children, who talk about, you know, they're in their 30s. And it's like Seth Rogen. I mean, he's a man-child. I'm not trying to be a dick to him, but he is. He's like, Saturday morning, I'm going to sleep in all day. And what's her face? And he's Gen X.
Chelsea Handler.
Yeah. Permanent children who have been like, there is no responsibility that I should have to engage in. I accept nothing. Look, as the saying goes, society grows great when, I believe the saying was when old men plant trees, but we'll say old people because we're very progressive, plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit beneath. But we're quite literally at the point where people like Seth Rogen, people who are in their early to late to mid 40s now, Gen X and older millennials, are quite literally saying, don't look at me. I'm going to party until the sun comes down. What does that mean for the future of this country?
It's deforming for everybody. I mean, this is not normal. I mean, the man is too old for this office.
Joe Biden.
I think so.
Oh, come on. Look, Dianne Feinstein didn't even know she was hospitalized. She was like, what do you mean? I've been here the whole time. And they're like, ma'am, you were in the hospital. How long was she in the hospital for? 3 months or something?
No, longer.
It was longer than 3 months?
She was in the hospital.
Well, she hospital and then she did this long rehab and stuff.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
She also, her team put out a statement saying she is going to resign, and then later was like, I didn't say that to a reporter. And they had to be like, no, yes, you did.
I got to be honest. Maybe it's that boomers are right and millennials are children. I'm you know.
Well, I mean, Yes, but boomers have original sin. They're the ones who did it first. So I mean, we might be bearing the symptoms of this.
But you mean
they
that
cast the first stone?
that millennials helped?
I mean, there's not a conspiracy, but like the reality, the reality is, I think we have a leadership class. Mr. Biden is an affluent individual. Feinstein was a multimillionaire, I believe. And the reality is, it's not like people are going to have these strokes or die. This stuff all happens, but they can keep older, wealthier Americans in general alive and kicking for like 30 years longer than they used to be able to.
But are you saying that boomers refusing to hand over the reins of society resulted in stunted millennials?
Yes, absolutely. There's been no changing of the guard. I mean, go back to 2008 when Mr. Biden was selected as vice president. One of the qualifications that was cited was that, there's no way Biden will run for president in 2016. He ran for president in 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, like...
But he didn't run in 2016.
But no, hold on.
Touche.
What's stopping millennials from rising to the occasion?
I think they're
Nothing,
refusing. I think they refuse to do it.
Well, first of all, the older generations have most of the wealth and most of the name recognition. I mean, because they had these positions of power. There's been no change of the guard. I mean, this is totally ahistorical. In 1960, Kennedy's elected president. Kennedy runs against Nixon. Everybody forgets Nixon and Kennedy are the same age, even though Nixon looked a lot more haggard than the sort of model aesthetics of Kennedy, right? And it was a clear move, right? Like this is the first generation that had served in the infantry in World War II, right? Like Eisenhower, his predecessor, had been a general. JFK had been a soldier. It proceeded from there. Kennedy and Reagan were the same age, right? Reagan looked a lot older because he became the president 20 years later. HW was the last of that generation. 30 years, big generation, long period of time. HW to Clinton. That's the beginning of the boomers. Clinton is the great sort of center-left boomer president, and George W. Bush is the great sort of center-right boomer president. Then it transferred to Obama, who is technically boomer, but kind of codes Gen X. It's controversial. There should have been a handoff then. What do we do then? We actually go back 15 years. Hillary Clinton is born in 1947. Trump, for all of that's good said about him, is 1946.
He's a silent generation, right?
He's
late boomer?
He's boomer.
Early boomer.
This is like weird knowledge, but George W. Bush, Clinton, and Trump are all born within 60 days of each other in the summer of 1946.
Obama's a boomer.
Fun statistic to know.
Obama's a boomer.
Obama is technically a boomer,
but he pretends he's not.
But I feel like he codes Gen X.
Right.
He's hip. Yeah. He's cool. He has
likes
younger
Kendrick
children.
Lamar. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
right.
and his kids are younger. I think
like
that's
for
one of the
instance,
things.
like take another, David Duchovny, the X-Files actor.
Of course.
Does he seem more boomer or Gen X?
Well, I watched Twin Peaks, so I know he's older.
Me too.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I feel like he feels a little bit Gen
X-y.
It's sort of BS-y. But like my point is, like the early 60 birthday people can often code that way, as opposed to the core boomer people are generally people who have been born in the 1950s.
What year was Trump born?
1946.
So he's actually he's a boomer.
All three, Bush, Clinton, and Trump, are boomers.
Yeah, Trump
and
is a
Biden
boomer.
was born in 42. He's silent generation.
And they're all born in the same hospital.
46 is the first year of boomer.
You had me fooled for a second.
Sorry.
The generations do vary depending on what source you're using.
Right.
I just Googled it. The first thing that comes up is 1946 is baby boomer.
I don't think Trump's actually all that boomer in his approach. He's actually not that optimistic and not that supportive of the decisions made in this country for the last 50 years. That's why his tone is super different than Bush or Clinton's. His tone is different than Mitt Romney's. Mm-hmm. Like it's a fundamental, like, we did globalization and that was all very good. Trump is even as far back as 1988 when he was first running for president, where he first flirting with running for president. You can go back to see the Oprah Winfrey show. I think it's 87, 88. Trump, this is the Reagan years. I mean, like people really liked Reagan, right? He won 49 states. Like he's saying, like, actually the Japanese are crushing us. Everything's kind of bad. We shouldn't really be offshoring all these jobs. Like this is the 45-year-old Trump.
I'm younger than a lot of people who've actually experienced all this stuff, or I'm literally younger than the people who experienced Reagan and all that. But it actually sounds to me like the only reason Reagan won is because Carter was because of Carter, and the real reason was because of interest rates. It was what were they at, like 20% or whatever?
It was very high.
Yeah, it was very, very high.
Very high. Yeah,
higher
than today. Yeah.
So you look. The Federal Reserve could decide who they want to be president by just cranking up the interest rates and spiking the incumbent.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably, but it's usually this sort of like super judicial tango tango between the Fed chair and the president.
Right.
I mean, there is the like left-wing conspiracy is that I believe it was Don Regan, the Treasury Secretary, and Ronald Reagan hauled Paul Volcker in and like sort of intimidated him. And of course, eventually they got rid of Volcker and replaced him with Greenspan, who was the low interest rate guy.
Yeah.
So can I ask you a question? I love this. All of our presidents are boomers, and now they're definitely not letting anyone through.
Yeah.
Do we have
Biden's silent generation? The only way to beat
silent
the only way to
He's
beat
really
the boomers
taking
is
us
to go older.
But do
We
we
need to find
have
someone even older.
Do we
than Biden.
have a class or on either side of the aisle of Gen X politicians? I mean, we do have some millennial, but
the reality,
if all of the boomers are holding all of the spots in power, do we even have anyone to replace them? Are there that many options?
Cadres. I mean, with I think you're getting. Forgive me if I'm misinterpreting your question. The result of this gerontocracy is that there aren't as many people that have the sort of mid-high ranking jobs and have the normal pedigrees to take people on.
Right.
So I think that's kind of what you're getting. Even Biden's cabinet is strangely constructed. So Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, I believe is a millennial. You can search it. And Anthony Blinken, I think, or he's very late Gen X.
Jake Sullivan's got to be Gen X.
I think he might be a.
He's Gen X. Sullivan is 76.
Okay, and Blinken I think is Gen X.
Yeah, Sullivan's 47.
Okay, but he looks. Okay, but Blinken is definitely Gen X. I'm pretty sure. You could argue. They had effective chaperones in their roles. So Susan Rice was the previous National Security Advisor. Older, also had a West Wing.
No, Blinken's a boomer.
How old?
61.
That's the part of the weird Gen X coding. You're just gonna have to
They're
go.
pretending they're not.
You're gonna have to go with my framework.
Wait,
No. He was.
He's a boomer. He's literally boomer is 46 to 64. But my argument essentially was that I don't get mired in this, but like the early 60s birthdays have this sort of strange. Same thing with 70.
Yeah, he was born in 62.
Yeah,
64 is the
same age as Obama.
It's like you get the millennial Zoomer lunch right now.
Precisely. What is 1997? It's technically millennial, but it could pass as Zoomer. Or 1996, technically millennial, could pass as Zoomer. In my opinion, it all depends how you code.
Yeah.
Certain people want to code older. Certain people want to code younger. It's complex.
Yeah, like Seamus Coughlin, for instance, might as well be silent generation.
But I am a Zoomer because I was born in 95.
No, it's millennial.
I know. I'm
Oh,
just
sorry.
like I'm in.
I'm taking this too seriously, I think.
Well, okay. So what's Pete Buttigieg? Is he our only?
He's a millennial.
Yeah.
So he's our only millennial cabinet member.
AOC.
Oh, right.
Cabinet member.
Cabinet
AOC is not a
member. Are you talking about cabinet members and maybe?
Well, you were talking about the
Buttigieg?
cabinet member,
Yeah,
so I'm building up to that.
Buttigieg is definitely the only millennial cabinet member.
But I think there's a
AOC is not in the cabinet. Wait,
actually this would be an interesting list. Maybe we could produce it, and maybe it already exists. A list of Congress showing a graph percentage of generations in Congress.
The median age of Congress would be, I think, in the low 60s.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
which is historically would have been in the 40s or 30s.
You know, it's fascinating.
Complex. I mean, the Civil War, people just died. So I think
it's not just politics. I read a meme and it said that during the Apollo missions, the people working in Houston were on average like 25, 26 years old, and today they're like 48.
Yeah, we don't go to the moon anymore.
But that's so weird. But it's not just that. It's working in aerospace and NASA.
It's not all bad, but I think there's just effectively a real price to be paid for not taking the talents of people in their physical prime, 25 to 40 or something like that, and just saying like you're still a child. It's bad for everybody.
Everything seems delayed. Like everyone's having kids later. Literally everything's delayed, and then lockdowns stopped it. So
Maybe
stop on top of the delay.
But I wonder.
Lockdown is the most boomer thing.
I wonder.
I mean, it's boomer protection.
Extremely
Stay in your living room.
But I wonder if it's because of the economic issions.
That for sure.
2008 stops for a few years. Stops everything for a few years.
Yes.
2020 stops everything for a few years.
Yes. Yeah, the younger generation inherited just trash, which definitely accelerated the non-acceleration of their lives.
Yeah,
well, it's also
but bad things have happened throughout history. What
True.
is new about this
That's
is
true.
generally okay. There are great baby boomers, but I think this is clearly a failure.
Oh, they made Star Trek: The Next Generation. Baby boomers are awesome.
Yeah, millions of people. They did some cool stuff. But I think what is different about this situation is that you have an overclass that isn't going away. Like George W. Bush, the worst president in American history, and
George W. Bush.
in my opinion, he's the worst president in American history.
Not Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
If the portfolio, if the standard is the country and he inherited, Mr. President, here's the file of the United States of America in 2001 versus the file that he handed Barack Obama in 2009. I'm not aware of a president. Like, look, a war in Europe was going to happen. Like, whether or not the U.S. was getting involved is a debate. But I don't think the country in 1920 was radically worse off than it had been from 1912. And of course, the economy boomed after Wilson left office.
The creation of Federal Reserve,
Patriot Act.
Well, no, if Woodrow Wilson.
I'm talking about Bush.
We gotta pick our lane here, but yeah.
Bush. Yeah, sorry.
No, we can debate all that. I mean, but I'm just saying, like I think it's almost an above ideological statement to say that George W. Bush did a really, really bad job. Even if you're a deep conservative, I think you had to see.
Yeah, but
Trump
I mean,
thinks that. I mean,
I don't like Bush. I don't even want to defend him, but I also don't like Wilson.
My point is, though,
I mean,
we still have to listen to
Buchanan?
if you thought Wilson was the worst president.
Buchanan.
James, I think there was a whole succession of presidents in the 1850s that were quite bad, but the Civil War might have been inevitable. I don't think the Iraq War was inevitable. I don't.
I agree. Oh, yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it was an elective war of choice.
Yes. Yep.
So versus you could make the argument without Buchanan, the Civil War would have happened. Whether it happened earlier or later, like it was moving. Versus it is not clear to me that any other president would have decided to electively go into Iraq.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah. So, but the whole point is, though, even if you thought Wilson was the worst president in American history, he had the decency to die in 1924. Versus we still have to hear what George W. Bush thinks about Ukraine, which he can't even keep.
And then
track.
we have to watch him paint on Kimmel.
Remember, he can't even.
Hey,
he
he's
can't
an
even,
artist.
No. That Freudian slip when he said launching an unjust war in Iraq. I'm
saying that he can't even. We have to listen to this alleged wise man. And meanwhile, he can't even keep track of which country he wants to invade.
Democrats view him favorably now.
That's what's so weird to me is the Uniparty gave him some type of redemption arc. Whereas they won't do that for Trump.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.